They thought she was just another Marine, too quiet, too small, too ordinary. But when she spoke 2 words, the entire room fell silent. The air inside the forward base was thick, not just from dust or heat, but from fear. For weeks, patrols had gone out into the mountains and had never come back. The enemy was everywhere, hiding in shadows, striking from nowhere. Even the toughest Marines had started to lose faith. Then, boots hit the wooden floor, a calm, steady rhythm that cut through the noise. Every head turned. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres walked in. She didn't look like a hero, not like the kind you see in war posters. She was small, quiet. Her eyes said nothing, but somehow, everything. A group of Navy SEALs leaned back in their chairs, smirking. That's her. That's the one everyone keeps talking about. Laughter rippled through the tent. They didn't believe in legends. They believed in muscle, rank, and noise. At the far end stood General Marcus Steele, a man with medals covering his chest and a stare that could break stone. He had heard the rumors too, about a Marine who never missed, who saved entire squads. But to him, rumors were poison. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in results. The tent was packed, maps, radios, murmurs everywhere. But when Torres stepped inside, something shifted. Even the air seemed to change. Steele's eyes followed her. He didn't like what he saw. Not weakness quite, but calm, too calm. And that kind of calm only came from someone who had already seen death up close and didn't fear it anymore. Steele stood up. The noise stopped instantly. "You step forward," he barked. Every Marine froze. Torres moved without hesitation. Her boots hit the floor, 1 step at a time, like a drumbeat before a storm. "Name, unit," Steele ordered. "Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres, 1st Recon, sir." Her voice was even, flat, perfectly steady. It wasn't arrogance, it was precision. But that wasn't enough for Steele. He wanted to break through her calm, see what was underneath. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Not good enough. Call sign." And that's when the room stopped breathing. Every Marine, every SEAL, every man who had laughed moments ago, froze. The air turned heavy. Even the lights seemed dimmer. They had all heard the rumors. A name whispered through radios and foxholes. A ghost in human form. A myth that made men believe in miracles. Torres didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't move. She lifted her chin. Her eyes locked with the general's, and then she said it, soft but sharp as a knife. Spectre 6. Silence. Complete. Unbroken. Even the hum of the generator outside seemed to fade away. General Steele's face hardened. He had seen that name before, buried deep inside classified reports, the kind not meant for daylight. Stories of missions gone wrong, that somehow turned into victories. Of squads that returned home alive when they shouldn't have. He'd dismissed them as myths, but now that myth stood in front of him, real, breathing, alive. The Marines shifted in their seats. The SEALs stopped smirking. No one laughed now. Every man in that tent could feel it. Spectre 6. A name that didn't belong to a legend anymore. It belonged to her. One SEAL whispered under his breath, "No wonder they're alive." And just like that, every rumor, every story, every doubt turned into truth. General Steele took a slow breath. His voice dropped low. "I hope, Sergeant, that name isn't just smoke." Torres didn't look away. "It isn't, sir." For the first time that night, the silence wasn't disbelief. It was respect. Raw, earned, and deep down the general knew something had just changed. This woman, this soldier, this Spectre 6 wasn't just part of the mission. She was the mission. Pause. No one spoke. No one moved. But every man in that room would remember this moment for the rest of their lives. They thought Kabul was quiet that morning, but quiet in Kabul never meant safe. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres walked point. Her rifle steady, her steps careful. The streets were narrow, the walls scarred by war. Children stared from doorways, their faces empty, eyes hiding something she couldn't read. She felt it, the weight in the air before a storm. Then in a single heartbeat the silence shattered. Bullets tore through the street. Windows exploded. Marines hit the ground, scrambling for cover. Shouts filled the radio. "Man down, we've got wounded." The air filled with dust and fear. Torres didn't panic. Her breathing slowed. Her mind sharpened. She saw the chaos like a map. Enemy fire from rooftops, from alleys, from every side. Her squad was trapped. No way forward. No retreat. But in that storm of gunfire, she saw something no one else did. A gap. A blind spot the enemy hadn't covered. She dropped low and crawled. The ground tore at her knees. Dust filled her lungs. Bullets hissed past her head, snapping the air inches away. But she kept moving. She didn't stop. Inch by inch, she crawled through rubble and blood until she reached the shadows of a collapsed wall. Her finger tightened on the trigger. One shot, a sniper dropped. Another step forward, another shot. Another target gone. She moved like smoke, slipping through alleyways, unseen, unheard. 12 enemy firing points fell in minutes. Every shot clean, every shot final. Back in the alley, the Marines felt it. The pressure changed. The fire that had trapped them started to fade. They lifted their heads, realizing they could breathe again. "Push forward!" someone yelled. And they did. When Torres returned, her rifle was still hot, her uniform streaked with dust. She said nothing. She didn't have to. Every Marine there knew who had saved them. Not one was lost. Not one. Later, officers argued about it. They said it was luck. They said it was exaggerated. But the men who were there knew the truth. They whispered her call sign like a prayer. Spectre 6. The ghost who crawled through hell and brought them all home. The name spread across bases. From chow halls to barracks, soldiers spoke of her in hushed voices. At first, command dismissed it as another story. But the whispers didn't fade, they grew. Because every Marine who'd been saved by her hands swore the same thing. She was real. Elena Torres never spoke of that day. While others laughed and shared war stories, she sat alone cleaning her weapon. Her eyes were calm, but behind them lived the weight of memory. She didn't see glory. She saw faces. The faces of the men who'd come home because she refused to fall. To her, Spectre 6 wasn't a title. It was a promise that no one under her watch would be left behind. But not everyone believed in her the same way. General Marcus Steele didn't believe in legends. He believed in control. And legends, he thought, made soldiers reckless. When word came that Recon Bravo had gone dark on the outskirts of Kabul, the room froze. No comms, no response. High chance of ambush. Steele looked up from the report, his voice cold. "Sergeant Torres, you're on point." The words hit like a hammer. The same men who once laughed at her now fell silent. Torres didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir." She checked her rifle, tightened her gear, and stepped forward. The others followed. Boots hit the dirt. Rifles clicked into place. The convoy rolled out under red light, engines low, the night heavy and quiet. No one spoke. They all knew this mission would test them, and leading them into the darkness was the same woman who'd already walked through it once before. The city lights faded behind them. The outskirts grew darker, quieter, colder. Every shadow felt alive. Torres scanned the rooftops, the broken walls, the streets ahead. Somewhere out there the trap was waiting, and deep down she knew this night wouldn't just test her name. It would define it, because legends aren't born from glory. They're born from survival. The night was silent when the convoy reached the outskirts of Kabul. The moon hung low, casting broken light across the ruins. Every shadow looked alive. Every corner whispered danger. Torres sat in the lead vehicle, her eyes scanning the darkness through the cracked window. Her mind was calm, focused. She had seen this kind of silence before. It was the kind that came before blood. "Spectre 6, lead them in," came Steele's voice over the radio. She gave one short nod, even though no one could see her. "Copy that, sir." The convoy stopped. The men stepped out, boots crunching over gravel. The night air was dry, cold, and heavy with something unseen. Torres raised her hand. "Stay sharp," she whispered. Her team spread out, rifles up, hearts pounding. The alleys ahead were narrow and dark. No sound but the soft hum of the wind between broken buildings. A single dog barked somewhere far away, then silence again. The SEAL closest to her muttered, "Feels like a trap." Torres didn't answer. She just looked up toward the rooftops. The stillness wasn't right. No movement, no sound. Even the air felt like it was holding its breath. Then it began. A single shot cracked through the night, followed by another and another. The street exploded into chaos. Bullets slammed into walls, tearing chunks of stone. A Marine screamed, hit in the shoulder, dragged behind cover. "Contact left, contact top right," someone shouted, their voice almost drowned by gunfire. The Marines and SEALs dropped low, trapped in the choke of narrow streets. Every direction rained bullets. Muzzle flashes lit up the rooftops like lightning. The enemy had them surrounded. Torres pressed her back against a shattered wall. Her breathing stayed steady, her heartbeat slow. She looked up, studying the patterns of gunfire. Angles, timing, shadows. She saw something no one else saw. There, a half-collapsed wall, just enough grip to climb. She turned to her men. "Cover me," she said. No one argued. They knew better than to question her now. Gunfire roared as she sprinted forward, low and fast. Bullets cut through the air beside her, snapping inches from her head. She reached the wall, grabbed a broken edge and began to climb, one hand, then another. Her body moved like it had done this 1,000 times. The moment she reached the top, she rolled over, silent as a shadow. A sniper lay ahead, his rifle aimed down at her squad. He never saw her coming. One pull of the trigger, and he was gone. She shifted positions, crawling across the roofline. Another target, another shot. Clean, silent. Below, her team started to notice. The fire pinning them down began to ease. The enemy's rhythm broke. Confusion spread among them. "She's clearing the rooftops," a Marine shouted. One by one, Torres took them out. Her rifle spoke only when it had to. Every shot counted. No noise. No wasted bullets. From below, the Marines saw flashes above, her silhouette moving through the smoke. To them, she looked like a ghost. She moved from one building to another, jumping gaps, landing soft, barely a sound. The enemy never even had time to turn before she ended them. Then came the silence, a silence heavier than before, the kind that means it's over. Torres looked down from the rooftop. The alley was clear. The men below were breathing again. She raised her hand. "Push left." They moved, fast and precise, dragging the wounded, checking corners, covering every angle. For the first time since the ambush began, they had control again. Torres climbed back down, landing in the dust beside her men. Her rifle was still warm. Her eyes were cold and focused. No one spoke. No one needed to. The SEAL who had laughed at her days before just stared, his mouth slightly open. "That's not rumor," he whispered. "That's real." The mission wasn't over yet. They regrouped, checked ammo, and pressed forward through the ruined blocks. Every step was cautious, every corner a risk. The radio crackled. "Recon Bravo, do you copy?" Silence. Then, a faint voice came through, weak, broken. "We're pinned down. Coordinates." Static swallowed the rest. Torres lifted her radio. "Hold position, we're coming." The team picked up pace. They followed her through the darkness, guided only by her quiet commands. "Left side clear. Move 2 up. Watch that corner." Finally they saw it, a burned-out school building at the edge of the district. Inside, the trapped unit was holding their ground. The walls were full of holes. The air was thick with smoke and fear. Torres crouched behind a wall, eyes scanning the field. She saw muzzle flashes, enemy positions across the courtyard. They had the building surrounded. One of the SEALs cursed. "We can't get through that crossfire." Torres watched for a moment longer. Then she spoke. "I can." Before anyone could stop her, she was gone. She moved through the shadows, using every bit of cover, slipping between walls, sliding under collapsed beams. She was close enough to hear enemy voices shouting in another language. She didn't hesitate. 3 shots, 3 enemies down. She switched position, fast. Another group, 2 more gone. Every bullet she fired opened space for her team to move. "Go!" she shouted into the radio. The Marines broke cover, rushing the courtyard. Grenades thundered. Smoke filled the air. Torres climbed a nearby wall, giving overwatch, taking out anyone who tried to flank them. Her voice stayed calm over the comms. "Left side clear, push through." In minutes, the trapped unit was free. The surviving men stumbled out, exhausted and bloodied, but alive. One of them looked at her, eyes wide with disbelief. "You came for us," he said quietly. Torres just nodded. Nobody gets left behind. When the convoy finally rolled back toward base, the sun was rising over Kabul. The city looked calm again, but they all knew how close it had been. In the trucks, no one spoke. They were too tired, too shaken. But every man there knew one thing for certain. Without Spectre 6, none of them would have made it home. They didn't need to say it. They just looked at her in silence, the same way men look at something they'll never forget. That morning, when they reached the gate, General Steele was already waiting. He didn't speak right away. He just watched as Torres stepped out of the vehicle, dust covering her uniform, her face unreadable. The men she'd saved stood behind her, every one of them alive. For a long moment, Steele said nothing. Then, quietly, he spoke. "Spectre 6, you kept every man alive today." He didn't salute. He didn't smile. Just a small nod, the kind that means respect, not rank. And in that moment, the legend stopped being rumor. It became truth. Across Kabul, soldiers whispered her name again. Not in disbelief, not as a myth, but as a fact. Spectre 6, the Marine who walked through fire and never broke. The base was quiet that night. The floodlights hummed, casting long shadows across the tents. The smell of gunpowder and dust still hung in the air. Inside the operations tent, men moved slowly, their faces pale from exhaustion, their eyes still replaying what had happened. Every Marine, every SEAL who'd gone out on that mission was back. Every single one. That had never happened before. When Torres walked in, the sound of her boots echoed through the silence. The same tent that once filled with laughter and doubt was now filled with something else. Respect. The SEALs who had mocked her now stood against the wall, straight-backed, silent. The Marines who once whispered about her now lowered their heads when she passed. The air itself felt different, heavier, calmer, as if the entire base understood what she had just done. General Marcus Steele stood at the head of the table. His uniform was spotless, his ribbons shining under the dim light. But for once he wasn't the loudest man in the room. He didn't have to be. Torres stopped in front of him and saluted. Her hand was steady, her face unreadable. The room waited, breath held. Steele stared at her for a long moment, saying nothing. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp, but there was something different behind them now. The disbelief was gone. The doubt was gone. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, calm, and heavy with meaning. "Spectre 6, he said, letting the name roll off his tongue like a verdict. "You brought them all home." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a speech. He just gave a slow nod, the kind of nod that men earn, not ask for. That small gesture hit harder than any medal, because from a man like Marcus Steele, that wasn't approval. It was something rarer, respect. No one moved. No one spoke. Every soldier in that room knew they were witnessing something they would tell their children one day. Torres lowered her hand and stood at ease. Her face didn't change. No smile, no pride, just the quiet calm of someone who had done what she had to do, and then, without another word, she turned and walked out. Outside, the night was cold. The desert wind moved through the base, carrying faint sounds of laughter from the barracks, the laughter of men who were still alive. Torres walked past them quietly, her boots leaving small prints in the dirt. She found an empty spot near the edge of the base and sat down on a stack of sandbags. Above her, the stars stretched wide and endless, the same stars she had seen 1,000 times on 1,000 nights like this. She took her rifle, rested it across her knees, and began cleaning it slowly. Each motion was calm, deliberate, almost peaceful. In the distance, she could hear a group of young recruits whispering. They were talking about her. "Spectre 6, one said softly. "That's the one who saved them all." The others nodded, their faces lit by the dim lights of the camp. Some had already carved her call sign, S6, into their helmets, into their rifle stocks, into scraps of paper tucked inside their pockets. A symbol of belief. To them, Spectre 6 wasn't a rumor anymore. She was proof. Proof that courage still existed. Proof that fear could be beaten. Proof that legends could be real. Torres didn't turn toward them. She didn't need to. She wasn't doing it for fame or for her name. She did it for the men who had trusted her, the ones who followed her into the dark and came back breathing. She looked up at the sky, her voice barely above a whisper. "As long as they come home," she said, "the name is worth it." The wind carried her words into the night. Somewhere in the distance, a radio played faintly, mixing with the hum of generators and the soft voices of soldiers still awake. Inside the barracks, men were already writing home, telling their families about the mission, about how they made it out alive, about the Marine who wouldn't stop until every one of them was safe. The story spread like wildfire, across Kabul, across the camps, across every base where soldiers still fought and hoped and prayed to see another sunrise. Spectre 6 became more than a name. It became a legacy. Her call sign was painted on walls, scratched into helmets, whispered before missions like a good luck prayer. And though Elena Torres never asked for it, the name followed her everywhere. Through every operation, every firefight, every new Marine who learned what courage looked like. She had become something larger than a soldier. She had become the story they told when everything went wrong. The reminder that even in the darkest corners of war, someone would always rise. And so long after that night, long after the dust of Kabul settled and the echoes of gunfire faded, the name lived on. Spectre 6, a call sign spoken in silence. A legend born from fire, a soldier who walked through hell and never broke.